was elected as the Prime Minister of the East Turkestan government in exile on November 11, 2019. Mr. Hudayar was born to a Uyghur business family in Atush, East Turkestan. He studied international studies and politics at the University of Oklahoma and was a member of the Army National Guard from 2011 to 2013. He is currently pursuing a master's in national security studies from the American Military Institute. On June 4th, 2000, Salih Hudayar fled to the United States with his family, where they became political refugees. He grew up in Oklahoma, and despite being so young, he began to spread awareness about East Turkestan and the situation there. He moved to Washington, D.C. in the summer of 2017 and founded the East Turkestan National Awakening Movement, or ETNAM. Under his leadership, ETNAM sparked a national awakening across the East Turkestan diaspora and reignited the flame of independence. Mr. Hudayar spearheaded the call for restoring East Turkestan's independence, along with calling for the passage of the Uyghur East Turkestan Policy Act. He reframed the East Turkestan issue as being an issue of territory and independence, and not just human rights and democracy. He joined the East Turkestan government in exile at the special parliamentary session in Washington, D.C. on April 20th, 2019, and was subsequently appointed as the ambassador to the United States and the assistant to the Prime Minister. Since becoming a member of the East Turkestan government in exile, Mr. Hudayar has continued advocating for democracy, political independence, and unity among his people. He has also been active in promoting nonviolent resistance to China's occupation among the Uyghur and East Turkestani diaspora. His vision is for an independent East Turkestan that is democratic, pluralistic, and peaceful. He also envisions that East Turkestan will one day be a shining example of democracy and human rights, not only in Central Asia, but also worldwide. Mr. Hudayar lives in Virginia with his family, and he is fluent in Uyghur, Turkish, and English. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Prime Minister, did you want to start your presentation?
Yes, firstly, I'd like to thank everyone for giving me this opportunity to speak, especially for the State of New Jersey's Holocaust Commission. And I'd like to thank everyone for taking their time to listen to hear us out and listen to the plight of the Uyghurs in East Turkestan. So would it be okay? Would I be able to share my screen or?
Yes, you should be able to. The button to share content is in the top right corner.
Okay. Oh, okay. Perfect. One second. Sorry. I think this is it. Is my screen showing?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Okay, well, this is not working. All right, let's just do it like this. Sorry, I apologize. So, firstly, I'd like to briefly explain the East Turkestan government in exile. The East Turkestan government in exile was formed in Washington, D.C. is actually established in the U.S. Capitol back in 2004. The East Turkestan government in exile is a parliamentary based democratic body with a representative parliament that represents the diaspora community across East Turkestan. It was originally made with over 40 representatives of different Uyghur and other Turkic diaspora organizations from 10 different countries. And it is the leading organization or entity that is advocating for the rights of East Turkestan and its people by promoting, the restoration of East Turkestan's independence, human rights, religious freedom, and democracy. Today, when people talk about the genocide that's going on in East Turkestan, many people are aware of what's happening now, but they don't understand the background of why it's happening. So in order to understand why this genocide is happening, we'd like to start off with explaining the historical background. Since 2014, the Chinese government has been locking up millions of Uyghurs, Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, and other Turkic peoples in East Turkestan, which the Chinese government refers to as Xinjiang, meaning the new territory. And these people have been put into what the Chinese government calls re-education camps or vocational training centers, but has been designated by US and other governments as concentration camps. More recently, the United States government, along with the parliaments of Canada and the Netherlands, have recognized China's atrocities as a genocide. And this designation has been based on credible evidence collected, including journalistic reports, Chinese internal documents, and testimonies from former detainees that were in these camps. Today's briefing will try to provide a comprehensive overview of China's ongoing genocide in East Turkestan and the historical context and what needs to be done. China claims that it's fighting against terrorism, separatism, and extremism. The real issue is a struggle of a people and a land, like the historic Jewish struggle to maintain their existence as China is trying to systematically eradicate them. The historical context of the present ongoing genocide of the Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples in East Turkestan really dates back to the Qing dynasty's occupation of East Turkestan in 1884, when it was renamed Xinjiang, or the new territory, or the colony, according to the official Chinese English dictionaries published during that period. The people of East Turkestan in the 20th century declared independence twice, maintaining a independent republic known as the East Turkestan Republic from 1933 to 1934, and once more from 1944 to 1949, before it was invaded and occupied by China. Over the past 71 years, China has been waging a slow motion of systematic campaign of colonization, occupation, and more recently, genocide, which has intensified since the start of the 21st century. China sees the presence of Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples in East Turkestan as a threat to its plan of achieving, quote, national rejuvenation, end quote, through the Belt and Road Initiative, and is implementing a, quote, final solution, end quote, to eradicate Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples. East Turkestan historically has a very unique history. With a history of over 6,000 years, East Turkestan has maintained a distinctive sovereign, national, and religious identity separate from China's, except for brief periods of Chinese occupation, which has occurred more recently. Historically, there have been numerous states and empires and kingdoms that have been established throughout East Turkestan, including the Scythian Empire, the Turkic Buddhist kingdoms, the Uyghur Khaganate, the Karkhanids, the Kumul Khanate, the Jungar Khanate, the state of Kashgaria, and more recently the East Turkestan republics. East Turkestan is actually a very large country. It's roughly 1,828,418 square kilometers, which is roughly 2.5 times the size of the state of Texas, or 3 times the size of France, equivalent to North Sudan. The Chinese government estimates that the total Turkic population of East Turkestan is around 13.5 million. However, other sources, including experts on the Uyghurs and Western sources, estimate that the realistic Turkic population of East Turkestan is more likely anywhere from 35 to 40 million, with the majorities being Uyghur. In 1949, when the Chinese communists invaded East Turkestan, the Turkic population at that time was estimated to be around 9 million. The people of East Turkestan today are, East Turkestan is historically, like today, a multi-ethnic country that has been long inhabited by Indo-European and ethnic Turkic peoples. The present population, especially the Uyghurs, are actually the hybrid admixture descending from the ancient Indo-Europeans and the Turkic peoples. A genetic study in 2008 found that roughly 60% of Uyghurs are European descent in their DNA, and 40% is Central Asian. This admixture that started about almost 2,200 to 3,000 years ago. Historically, East Turkestan, because it was always at the center of the Silk Road, numerous religions flourished in East Turkestan, including Tengrism, which is shamanism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Zoroastrianism, Nestorian Christianity, and even Judaism. There was a lot of Bukharan Jews that settled in around Kashgar in southwest East Turkestan before Islam became the dominant religion in the 17th to 18th century. Today, the Uyghur and other Turkic peoples of East Turkestan are predominantly Sunni Muslims, roughly about 98%, with some minority Christian, Buddhist, and shaman communities as well. In the historical context, in the mid-17th century, Naqshbandi Sufis, known as the Hojas, from what many historians believe are northern Iran, or what is now present-day northern Iran, began to immigrate into East Turkestan, and they sought to overthrow the Yarkand Khanate at that time. The Hojas, unfortunately, were a very radical group of Sufis, and normally when you hear of Sufis, you would never assume them of being radical, but the Naqshbandi Sufis, the Hojas, they began to submit the religiously pluralistic people of East Turkestan to a very extreme form of Islam, and then this led, the Buddhist and other non-Muslim communities of East Turkestan to overthrow the Hojas and banish them in 1758. The Hojas then turned to the Manchu Qing dynasty, and they convinced the Manchu Qing dynasty to invade East Turkestan. And in 1758 to 1759, according to historians, some 600,000 Jungar Mongols, Uyghurs, and other Turkic peoples were killed in what many historians would describe as like the first modern genocide. From 1759 to 1865, East Turkestan was ruled by the Naqshbandi Khojas as a vassal state of the Manchu Empire. The people of East Turkestan rebelled some 42 times against the Khojas and the Qing dynasty, and historians estimate that nearly 1 million people were killed under the reign of the Khojas. In 1865, the people of East Turkestan were able to overthrow the Khojas and establish the state of East Turkestan, or Kashgaria. Unfortunately, the British, fearing the Russian Empire would invade and occupy East Turkestan like it did with West Turkestan, they financed the Manchu Qing Empire through the Hong Kong Shanghai Banking Corporation to invade and occupy East Turkestan in order to serve as a buffer between the British and Russian empires. So in 1933, the first East Turkestan Republic was established around Kashgar following a rebellion in 1931. Initially, the republic was short-lived due to the fact that the Soviets feared the British influence would, spread across Central Asia and into Western Turkestan, which was then under the occupation of the Soviets. So they invaded it and overthrew it on April 16th of 1934. Then East Turkestan went through a dark period, roughly about a decade, under a Chinese warlord who the Soviets supported. Under the Chinese warlord Cheng Se, many atrocities were committed in many ways similar to what's happening today. Uyghurs and other Turkic political leaders, intellectuals, scholars, artists, musicians, landowners, businessmen and women, and people from all walks of life were imprisoned and killed. Historians estimate that some 200,000 people were massacred during this campaign. And this campaign was to colonize East Turkestan, to settle it with Chinese colonists, and to replace the Turkic language and religious practices and culture with the Chinese languages and culture. By 1942, things got out of control to where even the Soviets, they no longer, wanted to support Chiang Kai-shek. So seeing the people of East Turkestan were resisting against the Chinese government, the Soviets helped in providing, military aid to the Second East Turkestan Republic, which was again established on November 12th in order to, push back against China's colonization efforts. But the real reason was they were just using East Turkestan as a bargaining chip to get the Republic of China to recognize Mongolia's independence. And the Soviets stopped supporting East Turkestan in 1946. By 1948, the Soviets were negotiating with the Chinese communists, and it was Stalin who urged Mao to invade and occupy East Turkestan in order to prevent it from falling under British or American influence. In August 27, 1949, the top 5 leaders of the East Turkestan Republic, including its president, its general secretary, interior minister, defense minister, and a head of its national army, were allegedly killed in a plane crash on their way to Moscow. Recently, declassified CIA reports from that period state that 30 leaders of the East Turkestan Republic were killed between August to September of 1949 by the Soviets. So China formally occupied East Turkestan invaded East Turkestan on October 13, 1949, shortly after the founding of the People's Republic of China. On December 22nd, 1949, the East Turkestan National Army was incorporated into the PLA, and the East Turkestan Republic was officially overthrown. The Chinese government faced a lot of resistance to this occupation, and according to their own statistics, some 120,000 people, or enemies of China as they described it, had been killed by 1952, and by 1954 they killed a further so-called local counter-revolutionary insurgents. Since 1954, China set up the Bingtuan, which is the Xinjiang Construction Production Corps, Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps, which is a paramilitary force that was set up to colonize East Turkestan. Today, the XPC-CC numbers roughly around 3.5 million. They control most of the most fertile lands and across East Turkestan, and they are, increasingly colonizing, East Turkestan. Just between 2015 and 2018, according to the Chinese government's own statistics, some 2 million Chinese settlers were transferred in East Turkestan, while their population rates of the settlers were growth rates were almost 8%, 8 times higher than that of the Uyghurs. And the Chinese government does this by, giving them free housing, cash, land, healthcare, and other lucrative incentives. There has also been nuclear testing that has been conducted over the past, from 1964 to 1996, in which 46 nuclear tests have killed roughly around 750,000 people, mostly Uyghurs. There are millions of people in East Turkestan that have various diseases as a result of nuclear radiation. The U.S. State Department actually stated last April that the Chinese were continuing to conduct secret low-yield nuclear tests in East Turkestan. The concentration camps started essentially in around 2014, following Chinese President Xi Jinping visiting East Turkestan, where he urged the organs of dictatorship to be used in an all-out struggle against terrorism, infiltration, and separatism by showing absolutely no mercy. Initially, they targeted men between the ages of 15 and 45 on the basis that they would be prone to become radicalized. Then by 2016, with the appointment of Chen Quanguo to become the new Chinese Communist Party secretary, they ordered to round up everyone that should be rounded up, and under the direction of Chen Quanguo, the Chinese government began to initiate what it has called in secret documents as the final solution to end its East Turkestan problem. The Chinese government has, since 9/11, has been capitalizing off of the fact that majority of the Uyghurs are Muslim, and have been trying to portray its genocide as counterterrorism. A Chinese official told Western media that you can't uproot all the weeds hidden among the crops in the field by one. Thus, you need to spray chemicals to kill them all, meaning that they have, problems, and there are problematic Uyghurs, but because they can't find, who these problematic Uyghurs are, they have to, eradicate everyone to ensure that they are able to achieve their objective of keeping East Turkestan under Chinese rule. By 2018, Chinese officials were given the target of sending up to 40% of the population to the internment camps. According to Chinese government documents, there are an estimated 1,300 to 1,400 extrajudicial internment camps across East Turkestan. It was in May 2019 that the U.S. Department of Defense described these internment camps as concentration camps and estimated that some 3 million people were interned. In September of last year, the Chinese government released a white paper stating that 1.29 million so-called minority people were sent to vocational re-education, vocational training centers every year from 2014 to 2019. And so the Chinese government, because the fact that being, Uyghur and being Muslim or being Turkic is not in it itself cannot be an excuse to be sent to a concentration camp, they came up with multiple reasons, some 48 reasons as to why people needed to be sent to a concentration camp. So some reasons include from abstaining from alcohol, abstaining from cigarettes, for praying, for fasting, for having a beard, for going to a mosque or religious site, reading or owning illegal books such as Qurans, Bibles, or anything political, speaking the native tongue in school, in government offices, not attending mandatory flag raising ceremonies, not letting officials take your DNA, not letting officials download everything you have on your phone, not letting officials sleep in your bed, eat your food, or live in your house, having a VPN, having telling others not to swear, having traveled abroad, merely knowing someone who has traveled abroad, arguing with officials, speaking with someone abroad, whether it's via Skype, WeChat, etc., having too many children, more than another means more than 2 children, publicly stating that, for example, if we said America, America's better, is a better country, well, that's another reason for you to get sent to a camp. And then, even owning a tent, owning extra food, all of these are, reasons, official reasons why you can be sent to a camp. And just being related to anyone who has done any of these, is another reason why you can be sent to a camp. So if you have a family member who traveled abroad, or if you had a family member who, or a friend who, owned a tent, for example, just by association, you would be at risk. You would be a security risk, and you would have to be sent to a camp. This map here shows the locations of the concentration camps, the prisons, and the labor camps across East Turkestan. And this area right here is mostly desert, so the areas where there's nothing there is because it's mostly desert areas. And this is a concentration camp that is in my hometown of Atush. And so you can see the guard towers right here, and then here are the dormitory buildings for those detainees. This is where other detainees, like high security detainees, like in a prison style, and this one is where the factories where you work as pretty much slave labor. The Dabachin concentration camp, or vocational training center as it's called, this is the footage, photographs of it that were taken by journalists. It is one of the largest internment camps in East Turkestan, holding a conservative estimate of around 40,000 people in over 100 buildings. And it's roughly, before it was roughly half the size of New York Central Park, but more recently, in last month, the ASPI, they published new images showing that it had expanded, increased, more than doubled its size. So it's roughly about the size of New York Central Park. Conditions inside the camps have been revealed by some of the guards that worked there, by survivors of the camps. And from what we know from testimonies from guards and survivors of the camps and internal Chinese documents, detainees are subject to 14 hours of political re-education sessions per day, or they are forced to denounce their ethnic and religious identity, deny the existence of God, and worship Xi Jinping and the Chinese Communist Party as God. And they're also forced to learn the Chinese language and are forbidden to even speak with one another. And this is a smuggled screenshot of a smuggled video showing the inside of the hallway. Shows the inside of the cell-like camps. And this is the outside where during their political education sessions, they hold these rallies and people are, forced to, swear loyalty to the Chinese state. In the camps, in one cell, like, so these are cells right here. In one cell, you have 20 to upwards of 60 people held in one cell, where people are not even have room to even sit down or sleep. And sleep deprivation is common and used to mentally break down the detainees. Detainees aren't given, substantial food. They're only given 3 loaves of bread and watered down soup. And they're routinely forcibly medicated with unknown substances. And detainees who are Muslim are forced to eat and drink alcohol to further humiliate them. In addition for that, there are sexual violence and rape against Uyghur women, Uyghur and other Turkic women by Chinese security forces. BBC recently, they did an impressive a documentary on this, and after that documentary, they were actually banned from going back to report in East Turkistan. People are dying in these camps. Over 500,000 people have been secretly transferred from internment camps to secret prisons in China that are near hospitals that are known to be engaged in organ harvesting. This screenshot right here shows Uyghur men being blindfolded and loaded into cattle car trains in 2019. And we don't really know where that train went to, but they were transferred from a concentration camp to some other facilities inside China. Uyghurs sent to these secret prisons, according to testimonies given by Chinese prison guards. They are kept, in conditions with minimal food and water, extremely unsanitary conditions, and are prevented from even seeing daylight. One of the Chinese guards, they said that it's as if they brought them to die here. Because of the extreme secrecy of this, we don't know how many people have died in these camps and prisons. However, deaths in the camps occur regularly, according to camp survivors and guards. In one internment camp, which housed some 4,000 detainees, over 150 people died in a period of less than 6 months. There are also high-tech smokeless crematories that have been built in these concentration camps. So people are being killed and their bodies are being cremated in order to hide the evidence. On top of that, you have the forced abortion, birth control, and sterilization of East Turkistan's population outside of the camps. Chinese government reported that between 1979 and 2009, they prevented 3.7 million illegal births. Post 2009, we don't have any statistics of how many people have been, how many babies have been aborted, but estimates are that it's at least in the hundreds of thousands. in recent years, the Chinese government, post 2015, they began to forcibly sterilize the Uyghur women. Leaked governments showed that over 50% of the women in the concentration camps had been sent there for violating the birth control policies. In other words, having more than 2 children. By 2019, the Chinese government, according to leaked documents, planned to sterilize at least 80% of the Uyghur and other Turkic women who were of childbearing age. So far, we know that experts that have researched this estimate that, according to Chinese government documents, some 300,000 women have been forcibly sterilized. And with many mandatory government health checks and unknown substances being injected into Uyghur women, it's possible that many people are still unaware that they have been sterilized. Earlier, we mentioned the systematic rape and sexual violence towards Uyghur women. This is something that has been actually ongoing really since 1884, when even the Manchus and subsequent Chinese administrations, they used systematic rape and sexual violence as a weapon against our people. Even Western academics who visited East Turkestan in the 1980s have commented on their memory of seeing Chinese propaganda in female bathrooms across East Turkestan, stating that we will imprison and enslave the Uyghur men and rape their women. Aside from just raping the women, the Chinese security forces are also selling, the women to Chinese civilian males and profiting from, rape and temporary sexual slavery. And furthermore, you have 1.12 million Chinese officials, mostly males, who had been sent to live in the homes of Uyghurs, whose husbands, sons, fathers, or male households had been taken away to the camps and prisons. So in many cases, we've heard of numerous reports within our diaspora community and from news from East Turkestan, in which Uyghur women, young, middle-aged, and even elderly, committing unexplained suicide after, living with their male Chinese government-appointed relatives. Then there's forced marriages and sexual slavery, which we have kind of dived into. The Chinese government for decades has been trying to lure Uyghur and other Turkic women to marry Chinese men, and by offering them cash incentives, free healthcare, better job opportunities, free housing, in an attempt to assimilate and breed out the Uyghurs. However, this had not been successful, and so with the concentration camps, the Chinese government has been able to coerce Uyghur women to marry Chinese men if they don't want themselves and their family members to be sent to a camp. In addition to that, you have hundreds of thousands of Uyghur women, especially young Uyghur women, who have been taken from their hometowns and sent to provinces in eastern China to work. And some of these women in these factories have faced harassment, sexual abuse, and rape, and some, unfortunately, feeling ashamed, committed suicide, while others married Chinese men, and sadly, some even ended up in prostitution. Children are also being equally targeted by the Chinese government. It's not just the adults, but children are paying a brutal price as well. According to a planning document of the Chinese government, This was actually from 2018. We recently found a more up-to-date Chinese document from 2019 that states over 850,000 Uyghur children have been taken from their families and placed into state-run orphanages and boarding schools. The boarding schools and orphanages are walled and gated with security fencing, barbed wires, cameras, and police patrol to prevent children from attempting to flee or to prevent family members that are not in the concentration camps from seeing them. And so right here is a picture at the bottom of journalists trying to go to one of these boarding schools to document it, and they are being prevented from getting anywhere near it. In these boarding schools, the Uyghur children are dressed up in traditional Chinese clothing that even the Chinese people themselves rarely wear, and they are taught to, deny their own culture, their own language, and embrace Chinese culture, Chinese language, and become what the Chinese government calls loyal Chinese citizens. We have seen numerous videos of where children who spoke Uyghur were beaten simply for speaking, Uyghur by their Chinese teachers. And then other leaked videos showed many children trying to, attempt suicide by drinking detergent, and some of them even asked their Chinese teachers questions such as, "Is this gel?" And these are, very young kids from 4 years old upwards of, minors upwards of 17, 18, who are put into these camps, despite the fact that their parents are alive. They have, or if their parents are in the camps, they might have other relatives like grandparents that would be more than willing to take them in. The Chinese government won't allow it. East Turkestan has been turned into a total surveillance state, where aside from, technological surveillance, you have human, surveillance, physical surveillance by the Chinese officials living in your homes. Every 500 meters, there are checkpoints, and every 100 to 200 meters, there are little checkpoints like little gates that you have to pass that will scan your your eyes, your face, your retina scan, your voice, and then you get the pass. The Chinese government collected the DNAs, voice prints, and fingerprints and iris scans of over 36 million people, and this is according to the Chinese government themselves, between the ages of 12 and 65 in 2016 and 2017. There are over 4,900 convenience police stations almost on every block, along with hundreds of thousands of police backed by a 3.5 million strong paramilitary force across East Turkestan. And right here, this is what these convenience police stations look like. Literally, you won't go a block without running into one. You're even prohibited from leaving your own district. In cities, there are different districts. So if you live in a certain district, you can't go to another part of that city, another district in that city, without special permission from the Public Security Bureau. Even knives are banned, and you have barcodes etched onto your knives, and each family is allotted only one kitchen knife because the Chinese government is fearful that Uyghurs might engage in acts of violence. The Chinese government has engaged in routine massacres across East Turkestan since 1949 to 2014. Post 2014, it's very hard to get information, so we don't know if there have been large-scale massacres or not. We can't even know if demonstrations occur in East Turkestan. We don't even know anything about it. The most recently publicly known massacre was in late July 2014, when some 2,000 to 3,000 Uyghur villages were brutally massacred by Chinese security forces in a 48-hour period in the town of Yarkent. And this is nothing new. They routinely carry out ethnic cleansing campaigns, especially in remote villages where there is no possibility of anyone having connections to anyone overseas, or having foreigners in and around. In 2019, two Chinese PLA soldiers testified about their experience in ethnic cleansing operations, where one in the summer of 2013, 100 Uyghurs living in a mountainous area were arbitrarily slaughtered. And in another area, the entire Uyghur population in a mixed Uyghur Chinese village was massacred. The first event was deemed top secret, and this was for the purpose of what the Chinese government called stability maintenance. According to the testimony of the soldier, he stated, "We executed more than 100 people in a mountainous area. They looked like Uyghurs. Some were young children. With the help of a drone, we were able to see where the Uyghurs ran. They were unarmed, but we shot them with our the QBZ-95s, which is the Chinese-made assault rifles. They were doomed to die." Then there's repressive measures against religion. Since 9/11, since the September 11 terror attacks, the Chinese government has been using the pretext of combating terrorism to further its genocidal policies against the Uyghurs. Starting in 2003, minors, university students, government employees, government retirees were prohibited from entering mosques and other places of worship. Following the Urumqi massacre of 2009, the Chinese government began to repress all forms of religious expression, both in private and public. Mosques no longer became places of worship, but essentially centers for where the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party spread their propaganda. By the end of 2014, religious scholars, clerics, religious holidays, religious texts, beards, veils, scarves, and even Arabic and other foreign writing all became banned. Over 20,000 mosques have been destroyed in recent years, and this shows this is one of the oldest mosques in East Turkestan, built in the 12th century. And in 2012, people could still, attend Friday prayers. By 2014, by the end of 2014, those types of religious activities became banned. By 2017, as you can see, it's locked. 2018, they removed. It appears. By 2018, it's still standing there, but 2019, they completely demolished it. Then there's organ harvesting of people in the concentration camps and in the prisons. The China Tribunal, which testified it to the UN Human Rights Council, that China was harvesting in the organs of Uyghurs en masse. Many of the Uyghurs that we mentioned earlier that were secretly transferred to prisons in Chinese provinces, they were actually transferred to prisons that were near certain hospitals that were known to be involved in organ harvesting. Organ harvesting or organ transplants in China skyrocketed from less than 10,000 per year in early 2000s to over 70,000 per year as of 2020. Investigative journalist Ethan Gutman found that special lanes for organs only exist at airports across East Turkestan, and that many concentration camps near airports also had high-tech crematorias. He believes that the Chinese government is using the DNA that they forcibly collected from Uyghurs to match to match organs with the organ recipients, and that's why the Uyghurs are being killed en masse for their organs. And the crematorias are obviously helping to hide evidence regarding this brutal act of genocide. And so this lane right here is from the sign is a lane in Kashgar airport in East Turkestan, where it says special organ transplants only lane. The organs of Uyghurs, unfortunately, are being sold to wealthy Muslims from the Middle East as halal organs. And in many instances, as testified by some wealthy Saudis who received organ transplants in China, they stated that they had to wait less than 48 hours to get their halal organs. A Chinese government also testified that she witnessed 37 Saudi transplants receive organs from people of East Turkestan in 2007. There's also slave labor or forced labor that's going on, and this has been going on for decades, especially in the labor camps run by the Xinjiang Production and Construction Corps, which is the paramilitary force we mentioned earlier. Many of the Uyghurs were essentially used to build roads, canals, infrastructure, and to work on farms that were repossessed by the Chinese state and given to Chinese settlers. Recently, with the internment of camps, many of them have actually, the Chinese government has also given a lot of incentives to companies that build factories in East Turkestan, by providing them with essentially slave labor to where they can easily manufacture their products and make a massive profit. So all types of goods, from electronic parts that make up our iPhones to shirts and shoes like Nike. And recently, Nike has actually, pushed back against the atrocities, saying that it's not going to be doing any type of business related in East Turkestan. To even the hair that were shaved off of Uyghur women were turned into wigs and exported here into the U.S. The U.S. Customs and Borders Agency last year actually seized several tons of hair that came from Uyghur women from the camps. The ASPI in 2020, they published a report called Uyghurs for Sale, in which 83 popular brands from Apple, BMW, Costco, Coca-Cola, H&M, Nike, Volkswagen, and others were found complicit in the use of Uyghur slave labor. It also reported that some 80,000 Uyghurs had been sold to Chinese companies operating in eastern China that supplied these Western companies. So essentially, the U.S., the governments of Canada, the parliaments of Canada and the Netherlands have already designated China's atrocities as genocide. And the term genocide was coined by Jewish Polish lawyer Raphael Lemkin following the Holocaust, and was legally defined by the United Nations Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide in 1948. So, according to this convention, genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a nation, a national, ethnical, racial, or religious group, as such, killing members of the group, causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group, deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about its physical destruction in whole or in part, imposing measures intended to prevent group births within the group, and forcibly transferring children of the group to another group. All of the systematic atrocities that the Chinese government is doing in East Turkestan, from mass internment to forced separation of children, forced abortions, systematic rape and sexual violence, forced sterilizations, massacres, and organ harvesting, are essentially all acts that fall under the legal definition of genocide. So now let's get to the fundamental motives of why China is doing this. Because why would China want to wipe out the Uyghurs? What's China's problem with the Uyghurs? Other than the fact that it occupied the region. East Turkestan is rich in oil and natural and mineral resources. The natural gas and oil of East Turkestan make up an estimated 1/3 of the total of China's. In addition, East Turkestan also holds the largest sources of gold, uranium, and other metals, while the climate there is attractive for cotton cultivation. In essence, East Turkestan is crucial for China's economic security. And thus it's the cornerstone of China's multi-trillion dollar Belt and Road initiative, which is a foreign policy initiative intended to tie the Middle East and Europe to China through infrastructure, trade, and investment. The Chinese government has declared preventing the independence of East Turkestan as one of their key national defense goals, and that is why they are engaging in these atrocities to ensure that they can, reach their goal. In 1949, Uyghurs constituted 80% of the total population of East Turkestan, onto which, when adding the other Turkic population like the Kazakhs, Kyrgyz, and others, they made up about a total of 95%. The number of Chinese in East Turkestan at that time was less than 5%, as noted by Stalin, and it was Stalin who encouraged Communist China to raise it through to 30%, to at least 30%, to colonize it in order to effectively annex the land. China seeks to fully eradicate East Turkestan and its people in order to achieve, its Nazi-like fascistic ideals of, quote, national rejuvenation, end quote. So the international community, for a long time, many governments, because of trade relations, were reluctant to speak out against these atrocities. They knew what was happening, but in 2018, the U.S. government, knowing that what the Chinese government were engaging in genocide, they began to speak out against these atrocities. By 2019, the U.S., along with many European countries like Western European countries and countries like Australia, Canada, and Japan, began to push back against these atrocities through the UN. Unfortunately, the Muslim majority countries, including Turkic countries like Turkey and the Central Asian republics, have failed to, even condemn China's atrocities against the Uyghurs and the Turkic peoples due to their close economic and political ties with China. However, by and large, the largest support that we have gotten as a whole, or solidarity and sympathy that we have gotten, have come from the global Jewish organizations and activists who have been working tirelessly in all across the world to spread awareness and encourage governments to act to stop this. At current, recently, the U.S. government also, along with the governments of Canada, the UK, and the EU, sanctioned several Chinese officials and entities for their role in the genocide, and we're hoping that the UK Parliament and other governments across the world will recognize the atrocities as well. I think we are running out of time, so I want to just make it very quick, end it by stating some other goals that we're working on to get the international community to act on this. So we're asking the international community, especially countries like the United States, Canada, Japan, and the UK, to support our case against China at the International Court, to implement in the US, we're asking the US government to prosecute Chinese diplomats in the US for their role in the genocide. And we're urging the US government and other governments to bring the East Turkistan genocide issue to the agenda of the UN Security Council. More importantly, we're also calling on other similar legislations to push back against the genocide and slave labor, while at the same time urging governments to boycott the Beijing 2022 Olympics and to uphold their commitment to never again and their responsibility to protect those that are facing genocide. And one of the most crucial pieces here is that China's doing this because, as we learned, East Turkestan is an occupied country. China is, sees the Uyghurs as a threat to their own, control over East Turkestan, and that's why they are taking this final solution, as they call it, to end the East Turkestan problem. So we're urging people to and governments to recognize East Turkestan as an occupied country, but more importantly, we're also encouraging people to use the correct terminology when referring to, the Uyghur homeland. Many people, including the media and governments, mistakenly call it Xinjiang, which is literally a Chinese colonial term meaning the colony or the new territory. And by using that term, it's not only are you inadvertently supporting colonialism, but you're also adding further, humiliation and damage to, the people of East Turkestan. So I'd like to end it here.
Thank you, Prime Minister. The floor is open. If anybody has questions, you can just unmute yourself and ask your questions. Prime Minister, did you want to stop sharing your screen?
Oh, yes, I apologize.
It's okay.
Sorry.
Does anybody have any questions? Comments? I see we have some stuff coming in the chat. You can just unmute yourself and ask your question. It's okay.
Oh, okay. Hi. I just wanted to say thank you so much for the incredible presentation. Nearly my entire class is here, which is great to see. And just thank you so much for the learning experience. This is a really important situation to learn about. And, I just think that it's great that this was hosted for us. It's incredibly upsetting, but, the more teachers that learn about it, the more we can get it into our classroom, and spread awareness. So thank you.
Thank you for being here, for attending, and for learning. I think at the end of the day, it comes to average people like ourselves, to inform ourselves and others, and then to use our voice to encourage our politicians, our leaders to take more concrete actions to bring an end to these atrocities.
Prime Minister, I have someone that wants to know if they can get copies of your presentation of the PowerPoint.
Absolutely.
Okay, so yeah, Prime Minister, if you just want to send it to me, I'll send it out to anybody that wants a copy of it. Is that okay?
Absolutely. Thank you.
Perfect. Lynn just said so tragic. Thank you. Ma, did you want to say something?
Yes, I just want to thank the Prime Minister for his presentation, and it really gave me the chills as a Holocaust survivor to listen to what is happening. And everyone says never again, but it just continues no matter where, and it's very upsetting to me to hear this, because here we are in 2020 and these things are continue to happen in various parts of the world, and it's very sad. But I thank you for your presentation and bringing this all to light. Thank you.
Thank you as well, and we are truly, grateful for all the Jewish people and organizations, especially Holocaust survivors like yourself, for showing solidarity with us and for speaking out on these issues. It means so much to us.
So if no one else has any questions, if you come up with questions later, you can feel free to email me and I will email them to the Prime Minister. I just want to thank you guys all for coming. And please remember that since it is Genocide Awareness Month, we are having programs pretty much every single day. If you want to see what programs we have, go to the Commission's website. The calendar is there and it's completely up to date. So we look forward to seeing you throughout the month. And thank you guys all again for coming and joining us.
Thank you.
So much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Brianna. Great job.
Thank you. Bye, Devin. See you later.
Bye.